Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm welcoming Martin Armstrong to the show, an economic forecaster who has been called in by governments around the world in times of crisis, including the Reagan administration and Margaret Thatcher. The drumbeat of war is growing louder in Europe, and EU leaders seem intent on carrying on the conflict in Ukraine. So I asked Martin where this is all headed. We also discussed the brazen violence being committed against Tesla in the US and if it could be early signs that a civil war is brewing, along with getting his current thoughts on the Israel-Hamas conflict and Trump's attack on the Houthis and stark warning to Iran, and so much more. We're trying to make sense of this crazy geopolitical landscape, and no one better to do that with than Martin Armstrong. Martin Armstrong, great to have you back on Commodity Culture. I want to kick off the conversation today by focusing in on the United Kingdom. Interestingly, The Telegraph publishing an article talking about how Russia could potentially be behind the Heathrow Airport fire, questioning whether it could be an act of war. The country has already descended into somewhat of a dystopian nightmare, with citizens being jailed for speaking up against mass immigration and crime committed by foreigners. The media, of course, pounding the drums of war. Amazingly, Keir Starmer recently banning ninja swords in the country. See, politicians are stepping up and they're doing things. They're making a change. Never mind that it's, immigrants from certain areas of the world who are committing a lot of these crimes. There's no talk about stopping that type of immigration. It's instead, we'll eliminate ninja swords. I mean, it's completely insane. I had to double check that to make sure I wasn't reading some kind of parody account, but it's real. What is going on in the UK right now? Where is that country headed, in your opinion?
I think you must think that the Ninja Turtles are going to invade now. In my opinion, you have, as you know, I was called in when they were creating the euro. I told them they had to consolidate the debt. And Herman Kohl at the time said no. He didn't allow the German people to vote, so he took Germany into the euro basically on an executive order. He even admitted later, before he died, he acted like a dictator. Now, the problem emerges is that because they didn't consolidate the debt, we saw this in 2010. When Greece got into a debt crisis, what happened? The traders went, oh, wow, we made a lot of money on that. Who's next? Oh, Spain, Portugal, France, So the problem structurally for Europe is that one goes down, they all go down. So you don't have the same thing as in the United States. There's 50 states, fine. One state can go bankrupt. It's not going to take down the whole country. So the structural problem of Europe, I believe, is what's putting the pressure on them. That they know that they have this problem. So whenever you get that, in the political handbook, Rule 101, find an external enemy. When gasoline prices went up, Biden called it Putin's inflation. This is what they have to do. You look at Canada, Carney's really running against Trump. It's like, oh, he vote for me because he wants to make Canada the 51st state. You don't no longer talk about the domestic economic conditions or anything else. You always want that external distraction. And that's ninja swords and all this stuff. This is what it is. They know that they are losing power. You've had a significant shift towards the what you would call the right. And they're calling far right. Well, if they're far right, then you're far left, But it's you saw it, with the first EU elections back in 24. Then you saw the AfD come in second in Germany. um, I have a lot of friends in Europe, and like I've said on different podcasts, one of my friends has a 13-year-old daughter. He will not even allow her to walk 2 blocks to the bus stop anymore. It's the migrant crisis in Europe is much worse than in North America, mainly because most of them were from the Middle East. And so it's a cultural, difference. A girl in a mini skirt, couldn't possibly walk around in the Middle East. There were reports that over 1,000 girls were raped in Germany on New Year's Eve, and the government told them to take out the word rape and call it assault, and suppress it. Because, they don't want to take responsibility for what's happened. And that's what's taking place. So, Stammer, is there are many, many people. As you know, I used to live in London. Friends that I used to live, were neighbors. Hey, I'm coming over. I'm joining you. They're just leaving. And it's shocking. One friend of mine that was fairly high up in politics, he says, country's done. That's it. And he's actually taking his family and leaving. So this is the problem. Stammer's not going to admit that their migration policy was wrong, any of this stuff. So he has to blame everybody else, but himself. You're seeing this with Putin. I was just on the phone with some important sources in Germany, and who thought basically maybe I might be wrong or exaggerating, I would say 3 months ago. And now it's like, oh my God, everybody's talking war, talk shows, all the mainstream media. It's no longer the fringe. So, this is how they get it going, and once the media is involved, you're on your way to war, and they need war. You've got NATO over there talking about we can take out Russia. Ukraine seriously weakened them conventionally. He'll never push the button because we'll blow back on him. I've heard every excuse in the book, and the neocons that were here in America that were so anti-Trump, and they were, even had Dick Cheney endorsing Camilla. So because they lost, and I'd be curious to see, because now they're saying that shooter that tried to assassinate Trump in Pennsylvania was not alone. That's all I've heard. I'd like to see the details, but and people understand. It's like the JFK files coming out. It's like a CIA guy said, "Oh my God, I'm afraid for my life. There was a clique in the CIA that took out president." He actually says that. They withheld that information, but I think everybody has known for a long time, and so they need war because the debt market is collapsing because they never consolidated. One goes down, and it's going to create a debt crisis in Europe. Profound. So what I have heard from reliable sources, I don't know if they're smoking something, drunk or delusional or what, but they think that if they can conquer Russia, it has $75 trillion worth of natural resources. That's twice the size of the United States. And they can resurrect the Roman Empire again. And the United States will then be subservient to them. I mean, they've never gotten over the fact that, they blew themselves up twice, lost the financial capital of the world, and went to the United States. And it's like, they just, you had de Gaulle broke the Bretton Woods. He was buying up dollars, putting them to the U.S. to redeem for gold. That's why Nixon ended up having to shut down the gold standard, because he thought if France gets more gold than the United States, that France would then rise again. So, I mean, they just harbor these old, theories of grand, history. You got Eridan in Turkey talking about resurrecting the Ottoman Empire, Britain, you have these people there saying that, well, the sun still never sets on the British Empire, I don't know. It's they don't want to ever admit that they've lost something, I guess. I don't know. But this is all part of a distraction. And as I said, you're seeing Carney doing the same thing in Canada. It's a political strategy. So find the enemy. He's over there outside the country. Vote for me and I'll protect you. That's what even Hermann Goring testified about at Nuremberg. They said, how did you get all the Germans to follow? He says, it's very easy. Just tell them they're going to be attacked. And, if there's an external enemy and you're patriotic, and they line up. There was Stanley Milgram did a book, which I do recommend. It's called Obedience to Authority. Now, Stanley was a Jew. And at the time, the excuse was, well, Germans are just different than the rest of us. They have no remorse or something like that. And he went to go test that theory. And he set up, actors and told people off the street, here, ask him questions. And every time he gets one wrong, zap him. But don't go past this because you might kill him, but keep increasing it. And he found that people right off the street, New York, London, didn't matter. They would do it. And he wrote a book. It's called Obedience to Authority. And he concluded that if you think the person telling you to do something has the authority to do so, you obey. It's very, the psychological industry didn't like it when it first came out, but I think he showed that it was not just simply that Germans have no remorse sort of thing. This is a human trait that goes around. Some of his studies were very interesting. He had one person standing out on a corner, just pointing up in the heavens and staring up, and people would just walk by and just thought he was nuts. Put 5 people there, and then the crowd, what are they all looking at? Nothing. But they would do it. It's a very interesting book.
Hey guys, a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium, and to let you know all about the special that they are offering at this point in time, which are 2023 silver kangaroos, 1-ounce coins, mint fresh at only $2.07 over spot. So be sure to reach out to owner of ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium, Ian Everard, today at 307-264-9441. You can also contact him by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. Once again, Silver Kangaroos, 2023, 1-ounce coins, mint fresh, $2.07 over spot. Well, supplies last. And now, back to the episode. Yeah, human nature is a lot darker than many people think. I want to read something you wrote on Armstrong Economics. You said, I have never witnessed such complete incompetence among the pretend leaders of a nation than the crop we have in Europe right now. Of course, Putin has to now prepare for war with NATO, and I can tell you that China and North Korea will join Russia full on. Break that down for us. Do you think we are headed for a full-on war between NATO, Russia, China, and North Korea? And how would the U.S. react under Trump in that scenario?
Yes, I think there's no question about it. And Trump cut off the military supplies. So just a couple days ago, you had NATO coming out threatening World War III to Putin, saying that if he attacks Poland, because they set up the supply depot there in across the border in Poland to funnel all the arms into Ukraine. So basically, they staged this public display that if he dares to attack the supply chain here in Poland, that's going to be full out war. This is what they want, because otherwise, economically, the people are going to realize this is not working, and you're going to have people storming their parliaments with pitchforks. I was on a phone conversation, can't say with who, but with members of Congress who, again, earlier on, they thought, okay, maybe I might be wrong. I tried to explain to them, these are not my personal opinions. Okay. It's, nobody speaks to me in the middle of the night. But they have conceded to me, and they want some meetings now, out of the clear blue sky. But, that, we have to get out of NATO ASAP. I've warned them, look, they're going to stage some sort of a false flag. They're going to try and invoke Article 5 to embarrass Trump to get in. And I think maybe the reason they're listening to me this time, because I also warned, I had information 3 days in advance of Zelensky going to the White House. And Boris Johnson, they always send him in to screw things up. So he went, and he was there in Kiev 3 days in advance. And they told the signing of that document for the minerals, etc., was supposed to take place in Kiev. And Zelensky was told, no, you go to the White House and you try to basically embarrass Trump into keeping the support going. So that's why it appeared hostile. I knew that 3 days in advance, and I believe, at least Boris Johnson was part of it. And so when Zelensky went there, he basically was pulling out that nonsense, oh, well, you'll be attacked when they sail across the ocean and reach your beaches. I mean, get the heck out of here. I mean, but look, they didn't even try that in World War I or II, and so this has been part of the strategy. They tried to embarrass Trump at that meeting to stay in. He's smart enough. He, I think, now knows the game. First time in, he didn't. And I think that, as I said, I used to be part of the vetting process. They would send me in to explain the world economy to a potential someone who wanted to run for president. And it was always, do you think he's smart enough? And then 99, as I've said, as I want you to go down and meet Bush Jr. Oh, this one's different. I said, what's different? Oh, he's really stupid. So when Trump, they picked all the cabinet. They picked Cheney. Trump didn't do any. Bush didn't do any of that. Because I was even asked to be part of that cabinet, and I declined. And so when Trump got there, they pulled the same routine. oh, you're not a politician. We need to give confidence to the world that the country's still going to be run properly. And they stuffed his cabinet with all the neocons, John Bolton, etc. All right. That's why he picked his cabinet before he got to Washington. That politically was a shot across the bow. You got me the first time. You're not going to do it the second time. And so I think it's good that Trump went through that the first time because now he understands the real nature of the beast that he's dealing with. And so, at least based upon the phone calls that I got, they seem to be agreeing with me. You got to get out of NATO ASAP. So, because that will be the Zelensky 2.0. You know, try to embarrass him. Oh, see, he's not following NATO, blah, 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 you know. So I feel we got to get out of there. I mean, tomorrow by 8 a.m., basically. I mean, these people are just crazy. They really are crazy. And, you know, Europe was not structurally created properly. And that's coming back to bite them in the ass, as they say. So economically, look, this is why you're also seeing like the gold reserves leaving Europe and moving to the U.S. They know war's coming. All right. And even silver. All right. People don't talk so much about silver subject to a 20% VAT tax in Europe. All right. So, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, a great thing. I mean, we have no sales tax on precious metals here in most of the southern states and red states anyhow. Over there, they want a 20% tax to buy silver. So this is part of the reason I think you're seeing this stuff moving over here. And the threat of war. And then once they do war, you get the capital controls. Just look at World War I. They shut down all the stock markets in Europe. And they want people being able to sell those assets and get the money out. And the world was actually more globalized in prior to World War I. You could trade the same bonds and stocks on St. Petersburg in Russia, in Germany, France, London, and New York. So there used to be international arbitrage between these. And that's why, because they were all well connected, that's why Europe shut down the stock markets. So any foreign capital that had been invested domestically couldn't get out. This is also feeding into why they're pushing for the digital currencies.
I was just going to ask about that. The digital euro, is that connected to all of this? Because Christine Lagarde saying that they're accelerating that. Could this digital euro be a way of initiating capital controls in the case of war breaking out? They can stop people from using it to purchase certain things and control that currency.
Yeah, I mean, I have videos of her even saying there will be controls put in, even without the war. And you had the Bank of England proposing that, saying, I mean, ironically, kind of like your ninja swords, oh, a mother should be able to prevent her child from buying a chocolate bar for lunch. You know, so, well, if a mother can do that, what can they do? You know, so, I mean, you know, they're very clever in the way they lie about things. I mean, that's for sure. But yes, the digital euro is going full boat, and that's part of the capital controls. Once that's in there, it's done. They will cancel the currency, so you cannot run to the bank and basically take out cash and stuff it, you know, bury it in the backyard. Europe routinely cancels the currencies. Even Canada has canceled the high denomination notes as the January 1st last year. United States has never done that. So it's a foreign concept to an American. If you have a $5 bill from 1861, it's still legal tender. I mean, it's worth a hell of a lot more than $5, but to a collector. But legally, they have never, even when they put out the new $100 bill, I was flying around and there were ads on international flights. The old ones are still good. We're not canceling that because everybody else does. So Americans don't quite get it, I think. We've never had to deal with something like that. But Europe does. And that's why the gold's coming here. You're seeing, even the stock market with a bit of real estate. Everybody that I know are major clients are trying to get money the hell out. Because they know when that first bullet is shot, that's it. It's done. And whatever's there, you're not getting out. And eliminating the currency also would prevent bank runs. You can't go down, give me all my money out of the account. Would you like that on a CD-ROM or or would you prefer USB stick? There's just no way to do it. So a digital currency is the ultimate capital control. I mean, this was going on before war. That was the whole thing behind it. They can trace, if I give you a $100 bill, they don't know where I got it from. I give you 100 in Bitcoin, they know where I got it from and everybody down the line.
So I want to move to the U.S. now and a domestic issue that's become quite concerning, and that is seemingly crazed far-left radicals getting violent with their attacks on Tesla and Tesla owners getting harassed, Tesla cars being set on fire. They find these explosive devices at a Tesla. I don't know if it's a dealership or factory. What is going on here? Obviously, you mentioned how disappointed the left is with Trump getting into power, the neocons. And there have been some interesting links to NGOs potentially backed by George Soros who are involved in these attacks. What are your thoughts here? Are these independent people just crazed lunatics acting of their own accord? Is this an organized attack? And if so, who's behind it?
Historically, the left is always the violent side. The revolutions in Russia, China, they killed over 200 million people. You don't see that from the right. The philosophy, the big difference, I think, that takes place here. It was, I think, illustrated during the election when somebody at one of Camilla's conferences said about abortion and God. And her response was, "You're at the wrong rally." This is their attitude. We get in power. I don't care about your religion. You're going to have to adopt mine, which is none. Okay, so this is pretty standard. I have warned the computer was projecting that that look, it was, I was at a meeting in Berlin and I said, look, the computer says Trump's going to win. It's going to be like a landslide. All right. I said, personally, I know these neocons. I think they'll try and assassinate him. They thought I was crazy. Oh, come on. I said, I know these people. I've been to dinner with them. This is the way they think. I'm telling you. And nothing is off the table. Look, they took out, JFK. They want war. That's it. You obstruct us. You're you support the enemy or some crazy thing that they justify themselves with. I mean, there is a video on YouTube about General Wesley Clark, and he went to the Pentagon after, in 2007, it's published, and he went to the Pentagon after 9/11, and he was shocked. He said, they said then they were going to go into Iraq, and he asked, have you tied Saddam to 9/11? They said no. Then he says they intended to go into 5 other countries. And they were just using 9/11 as the excuse to try and subvert the entire Middle East. And I mean, I had arguments with Bill Kristol back in the 90s. And this is the same thing, that if we took out Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, we'd bring peace to the Middle East, install democracy, blah, blah, blah. I said, you're out of your mind. I mean, this Middle East is tribal. I don't know if you've ever even been there. But, it's not the same culture. You can't impose what you think upon others. I mean, but this is what they do. So I think the left our computer is showing you're going to see a lot more of this. The left is fighting for their life. This is what the computer is basically projecting for by 2032. And when I say our forms of government are the most corrupt, republics historically are always the most corrupt. But parliaments, even in Canada and Europe, they're beginning to realize this isn't working. How many Canadians I've heard from, I didn't vote for Carney. They're beginning to realize that the heads under a parliamentary system, Ursula, all the people that make laws in Europe, none of them stand for election. None of them. All right? They're all appointed by other politicians. And yet they tell us we live in a democracy. We do not. And they have the audacity to say, oh, Putin's a dictator. Really? When's the last time you stood for election? The parliamentary systems are even worse in that sense, but it's kind of like we have the Speaker of the House, right, stands for election by the politicians, not the American people. And that is the way parliamentary is, but for the head of the state. So they're seeing that in Canada. They're seeing, and it's interesting, especially after Carney. I've been hearing it a lot more. That you're right. It's government that's the problem. You have no right to remove these people. No right to object to whatever he says. That's not democracy. It reminds me of Vietnam. You were 18, old enough to be drafted, handed a gun and go die for your country, but you were too young to have a drink or to vote. But that's democracy. They just lie to us most of the time. But you're going to see this continued leftist agenda. And yeah, look, there are people behind this with money. Soros, in my opinion, he's been indoctrinated with this open society thing that he was taught by Pepper, and it sounds nice. All these things sound nice. Oh, equality. Right. Okay. So maybe 3 guys out of 10,000 could be a brain surgeon, but 10,000 could all sweep the floor with a broom. And we're equal in rights, but not in talent. I don't think you want to pay me $30 million a year to throw a football and the Super Bowl, Um, that's just the way it is, and the price of what somebody earns goes up proportionate to the supply and demand. Simple as that.
Well, I want to shift focus to the Middle East for a moment, where it's very hard to separate signal from noise in the media. We have recently seen Israel strike Beirut. It appears as though Trump is fully supporting Netanyahu. At least that's what we're seeing in the mainstream media. They've bombed the Houthis. There's that whole signal chat that ended up getting released, which is a bit of a big story. Some people saying, oh, they purposefully added that journalist to the chat for some reason or another. It was all by design. I'm not so sure. What is going on with this whole situation? Why does Trump seem to be going along with all of it when, on the other hand, when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, he seems to want to move towards peace? When it comes to the Middle East, it seems he's kind of supporting Netanyahu, who appears to be a bit of a maniac to me. Am I missing something here?
No, I mean, look, the problem in the Middle East is that it's a solution or a problem, I would say, that it has no solution. I mean, you're talking about this is religious, all right? And it's kind of like Ireland, you got the Protestants against the Catholics, and so the country is divided, and that's it, all right? You're not going to get some sort of a solution other than a ceasefire. That's about it. The Houthis are basically out of control. When they're attacking private shipping, things of this nature, yes, that affects the international economy. And so that's understandable, that why Trump should respond to them. And to what extent Iran is supporting them is debatable. But if that's the case, then I would say, then you get the escalation all the way up to there. But that still runs the danger if the U.S. were to get involved directly in Iran of still bringing in Russia. Look, Netanyahu is, some argue that he's pushing for this greater Israel project, perhaps. But look, the hard feelings in that area, I mean, I've been through the Middle East. I've been in Southern Europe. I've had employees both in Kiev and in Donetsk. They're just ancient feelings that they've been there for thousands of years. It's like, the Greeks, versus the Turks. I mean, this goes back to Xerxes invading Greece and Alexander the Great and stuff. You can't erase all that history, but they have, they remember this stuff. We were doing a conference in Athens, and as I've said, an employee from Kiev wouldn't take the quickest way home because it stopped in Moscow. I said, it's like a 1 hour layover. No. The hatred that they have been taught is just systemic. I've seen it both, throughout the region. I've been in Bavaria, in Germany. It's a holiday today. I said, what's the holiday? Oh, because we won the war. I said, which war were we celebrating today? Oh, we defeated the Prussians. It was Protestant versus Catholic. And it's a holiday. They remember it. These things are. I don't. in America, we kind of lost that. Um, and when I was meeting with the people forming the EU, I told them, I said, you don't understand what made the United States great. I said, it was discrimination. They go, oh, how could you possibly say that? I said, because it was fair. Whoever was the last off the boat was discriminated off, against to get a job until they spoke English. So now you ask an American, what are you? Oh, I'm half German, half Irish, half this, whatever. I said, you don't see that here in Europe because each country has its own culture, its own language. What you're trying to do to defeat the United States, I said, it's not going to be so easy. I'm telling you. Because you have these, I'm sure a French girl, if she brought home a German boyfriend, the father's going to go, you do know what they did to us, These things just seem to linger for, generation to generation. That's what's in the Middle East. I do not see any actual solution. The best I think you can get out of them was ceasefires. Try to get them to live with each other, kind of like Ireland, North versus South. But those resentments are always going to be there. They're just taught. I can tell you in Kiev, you do not dare bring a bottle of Russian vodka to dinner. They'll take it and smash it over your head. It's, as I've said on other podcasts, I was called in by Yugoslavia, before it all broke up, and they said, oh, what they killed 600 of us and threw us in a common grave. And I actually thought I missed something on the news. I said, oh my God, really? I said, when did that? Oh, about 700 years ago. I said, oh, okay, that one, but these things just linger. That's what I have learned, firsthand from traveling through the Middle East, Eastern Europe. I mean, you name it. I mean, I've seen it even in Germany. And just look at the French and the English. There's still resentment there. When they built the high-speed train underneath the channel, where did it stop in London? At Waterloo Station. The French, you can look this up. To join the euro, the requirement was nobody was allowed to issue any coin that celebrated their loss at Waterloo. Belgium issued a coin, but it was commemorative. All right, so it wasn't for circulation. So they danced around it. Belgium didn't really like the French much. De Gaulle had said that Belgium was created by the English to annoy the French. So, I mean, these kind of statements have just linger in the air, I mean, back in 1967, he made a speech. De Gaulle made a speech in France. I mean, in Quebec, and basically suggesting they should separate from Canada. They're French. They're not English. These things are there. I mean, I was the keynote speaker for BIS conference in Paris one time. And so I got to sit at the table with all the heads of the central banks of Europe. And the French guy sitting next to me, he was absolutely beside himself because the table started speaking English because it was the only single language everybody knew. And he was like, oh, this is Paris, But their view, I think, is that if Napoleon had won, then the world would be speaking French rather than English. So, I mean, these resentments are... So Middle East, I think it's not solvable. The best you're going to get is some sort of a ceasefire, maybe. But this has been going on for a very, very long time, and I think there's a risk of the Middle East really exploding. And although this is more directed at Iran right now, you have Erdogan in Turkey. When Hamas attacked Israel, he cheered and basically was advocating all the Arabs should join together. Why? Because he's made plenty of speeches. I mean, Turkey was the head of the Ottoman Empire, which also included Israel. All right. So he's doing the same thing. It's like this idea of resurrecting the Ottoman Empire, and so he will always talk against Israel and tries to get all the Arabs to line up with him, and so he can be the next caliph and resurrect that. And then you had Greece getting an order of F-35s, and what was their statement? Oh, now we could do a surprise attack on Turkey. They're two NATO countries. I mean, those things don't matter when you're talking about ancient hatred that goes back to Alexander the Great. So interesting times we live in, very, very interesting times. But I think that's what our computer is projecting into 2032. That, look, the average American, European, Russian, Chinese does not want war. We all just want to get along, take care of our families. That's it. Wars are created by the elite. And that's the way it's always been. They have never told the truth about one war yet. I mean, there was a big Senate investigation that FDR prodded Japan to attack Pearl Harbor. And I put on my site, there was even, I think it was the Honolulu Tribune, several days in advance said we're going to be attacked. So there was a leak. And the Senate had to investigate all this, and because it turned out the U.S. had broken the Japanese code. They knew. All right. And so the concluded was, well, we're not entirely sure that FDR knew in advance. It's very nice. But look, weapons of mass destruction. You take the Lusitania. You can Google that up. Archaeology magazine published it. They discovered the Lusitania, and Germany had written and took out ads: "Do not sail on this ship. They're using to get arms secretly to, and we're going to take it out." U.S. said, "Oh, we would never put civilian lives at risk like that." Well, when they actually found the wreck, U.S. came out and said, "Be careful, there's arms in the bow." An archaeological magazine published them. There they are. There isn't one thing that they haven't lied about. There are tapes about LBJ lied about Vietnam, even saying for all I know they were shooting at whales that night. We were never attacked. I can't find one war that they actually told the truth about.
Well, I think that's a great segue because you wrote a letter to Pam Bondi exposing the origins of Russia Gate, DOJ misconduct, and a U.S.-backed regime change attempt in Russia in 2000, and you discuss how they tie into Ukraine and NATO's push towards war. So walk us through this letter. First of all, why did you decide to write it, and could you unpack the contents for us?
Mainly because of all the propaganda against Putin that only supports going to war. And the true story is that Hillary Clinton was a neocon. I think everybody pretty much knows that. My sources from Congress dealing with the Benghazi affair, that we were basically using that embassy funding arms to overthrow Assad in Syria and in Libya. And that's why it was attacked. And when she was testifying before Congress, they asked her, why were we attacked? Oh, what's the difference does it make? She wouldn't answer. And the same thing with why she said Putin interfered in the 2016 election. And they asked her why. Oh, because I said some election was rigged in Russia. Really? So that justified him coming over here interfering in this because you simply said that and not even directly him? It was just absurd. But my concern was that I was even asked to put in $10 billion at the time to fund this regime change in Russia. They got they basically got Yeltsin to steal $7 billion from the IMF loans, and he steered it. They steered the wire through Bank of New York to a company that nobody had ever heard of to refurbish the Kremlin in Geneva. And as soon as the wire took place, Republic National Bank ran to the DOJ and said, oh, Bank of New York just did a money laundering. And so they run into Bank of New York, etc. And they charged it. It was the biggest money laundering crime in history. The two brokers get 6 months house arrest. That's it. Because it was all basically, I don't think the DOJ knew what was coming down, and they were just told to go in and do this. And then they found out, what they stepped into. There was a press conference where Putin and Trump worked together during the Russiagate stuff. And at that time, Putin said, you can come to Russia and question anybody you want, because they really had nothing to do with it. And he says, I want to question Bill Browder. Bill Browder was partners with them and Safra into this Hermitage Capital, which was the company they wanted me to put $10 billion into. And so you've got the Maginski Act, which is, Maginski was really just the accountant for this company. Putin went after the company because it was basically involved in tax fraud. I wrote a book, The Plot to Seize Russia. I went through the whole detail of it, what they were doing. They were when they were privatizing Russia, trying to get out of the communists, and how do we then transfer all this stuff to private people? If you worked at a company, you got so many shares. And then they put restrictions on it that to try and protect the people, that foreigners couldn't buy these shares. So what they did is they created this shell company that was a Russian company. It's then buying the shares. And then you take the shares and they would then try to sell them. They wanted to get Gazprom, basically listed in Chicago or London, and would have made, 30, 40, 50 times the money. I was told, come on, put in the 10 billion. And I said, look, my computer says, sorry, Russia's going to go down. And they said, look, I was told that, look, the government's going to change. We got this all set. So they blackmailed Yeltsin to step down, and their crony was Boris Baryshnovsky. And he even called me after I refused to put in money. And interestingly enough, just about everybody associated with this ended up dead. um, Boris supposedly committed suicide. His bodyguard said no, he was taken out by MI6. Safra, he was burned in Monaco in his suite. I was told by Dominic Dunn, who wrote the article for Vanity Fair on it, there were bullets found in the body. So, I mean, look, it's when I wrote that basically to Bondi because, look, I think it's important now that we at least get this narrative straight. Because all you get from the media, Trump, is that Putin's evil. Oh, he has to be destroyed. Blah blah blah. You had the former prime minister of Estonia saying Russia's too big and needs to be broken up. I mean, what if he said that about the United States? I mean, so I basically said, look, this is really what happened. And we have to understand what these neocons are doing. They did their best to try to stop Trump here. And now they're all in London and Paris, and they're in charge of all of Europe. As I said, this is the worst crop of world leaders I've ever seen in my life. And they used to send me in to meet people to see if they were qualified. And I would have to say no on every one of them. It's just pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And they're all preaching the same nonsense. I can't say who, but I spoke to one out of Italy, and I said, during World War II, Hitler, maybe didn't like the Jews. Mainly, the theory was that communism was a Jewish conspiracy because Lenin was Jewish and Trotsky was Jewish. That's where this all really, anti-Semitism really came about, and the same thing you saw in Ukraine. But, on the other hand, Hitler seemed to like history. He stole all the art. And he didn't bomb it. He didn't bomb Paris because he actually said he thought it was a pretty city. And he didn't bomb the monuments. I said, this time, if they lob one in here to get your ass in Rome, guess what? The Colosseum goes. I said, we're playing a different ball game here. I just don't. I was told, Putin's going to have to accept, our terms. I said, really? You're going to invade? What are you going to do? It's just, I don't know, delusional. But it doesn't seem to be any leader of any of the European countries that I would say I'd even want to sit down and have a drink with. It's just like, do I need to write your name on a card so you don't forget it? This is the worst crop of political leaders I've ever seen in my entire life, and probably in history.
Wow, that's quite a statement. Well, this is a fantastic place to end it, Martin. As always, an epic conversation whenever I get you on the show. Tell us about Armstrong Economics and the Socrates platform as well.
I developed this mainly because I didn't want to become a lawyer. My father was a lawyer. He pushed me into programming. So I learned how to program, and then I really didn't want to stay in the field. I liked trading, and then when I got into that in the 70s, I said, gee, I could write a program to do this. And so Socrates is the first fully developed artificial intelligence system with a track record is now, I guess, nearly 50 years old. And these forecasts don't come from me. And I think what it is that there is pressure in the system, as we were talking about with the debt problem. So they know they have a problem. So they need to find an alternative. So that's what I think the computer is following, this pressure, capital flows, things of that nature. And I learned about war. Again, when I created this, I had no intention of creating something with forecast wars, etc. We had a client in Lebanon, one of the major banks, and they called up because we were, basically probably the biggest in foreign exchange forecasting, and asked us if we could do a model on the Lebanese pound, that they found a ledger in the basement back in Lebanese pound, decades. And I said, sure, put it in. And out came it was going to their country was going to fall apart in 8 days. I thought something was wrong with the data. I called him. I said, look, this can't be right. And very calmly, he said to me, what currency would you recommend? I said, well, it says the Swiss franc. Over time, what I came to realize is that he didn't come to me for that forecast. He came to me for the timing. They already saw the capital moving. And what the computer is picking up and all the capital flows, that's how we were able to forecast basically the collapse of Russia in 98. We saw, 100 billion going in, but we saw 150 billion coming out. All right. Over the years, I've learned somebody knows an event's going to happen, and they start moving that money. Ahead of COVID, look to see who started reducing their portfolio in advance. I think you'll see even the WEF did. The stocks, the defense stocks, all started moving a week ahead of the Hamas attack in Israel. So the computer's monitoring all this stuff more than any individual could possibly do. And it correlates it all and comes back. And that's what why I think its track record has been unsurpassed. And it's not me personally. All I can do is say, look, this is what it says. All right. It puts out a timing arrays, turning points, panic cycles, things that, and it's writing reports on over 1,000 instruments every day. No human interaction whatsoever. So we're not blocked in China, Russia, anywhere. Because everybody knows this is a computer writing this stuff. It's not on page 3, by the way, overthrow your government, So that's it. It's become very interesting to follow and watch. It's been incredible in elections. It forecasts like Brexit. Even Nigel Farage came to our 2019 conference in Rome. He says, of course I'm here. He's the only one that said I would win. Every newspaper said Brexit was going to lose. Same thing, with Trump. It hasn't been wrong on these things. And what I can tell you is this. If you turn the economy down, and people lose, confidence, whatever, whoever is in power, and it doesn't matter if they're left, right, center, whatever, they're thrown out. Simple as that. Herbert Hoover took power in 29. Market turns down. They called them, Hoovervilles. He had nothing to do with it, but it was a sovereign debt crisis from Europe in 31. They're all defaulting on their debts and 9,000 banks go down. This wasn't Hoover, but he gets blamed. And that's simply the way human nature responds. So the computer's been reliable on political forecasts of this nature, Um, I mean, I got emails that when the model turned, it even picked the very day of the elections in Poland. I mean, I'm not looking at it. It's just fascinating. But I think that's my best explanation is that there is a pressure in the system that it's seeing, and that we get these events that turn based upon that pressure. So the gold wouldn't be coming here if everybody was fat and happy in Europe. You start threatening wars. People are going to move. Simple as that. You get the hell out. Get it out now before you might not be able to. U.S. was bankrupt, as I've said many times, in 1896 when J.P. Morgan had to lend $100 million to the Treasury to bail it out. And then we go to the financial capital of the world after World War I. Then World War II, we ended up with 76% of the world official gold reserves. It all came here. This is what you're seeing now. The capital is, okay, fine. We get a correction in the local stock markets. It's just a correction. It's not a crash. Why? Because you got foreign capital coming in and say, oh, okay, I can save some money now. Real estate, you still have the shift, people leaving the blue states, going to the red states. I mean, I'm here in Florida, and I still get at least 3 calls a week. You want to sell your house? No, thank you. Where am I going to go? Chicago or something? Not interested. So you have that domestic shift that's still taking place. Largely they're going to say that Miami's replacing Wall Street. Most of them are coming down here. No state income tax. You go up there. I mean, the biggest hedge fund, New Jersey, moved down here. I knew guys that were at some of the top banks in New York, within the top 5 echelons. I got a call. Gee, you want to go to dinner? I said, I thought I was down here just for a vacation. Nope, I moved here. Really, working virtual. Why would I be up there? And my lawyer in Philadelphia, they don't even go to the office anymore. It's too dangerous. Everybody's working virtual. So these things all combine, and they shift the trends. So you're looking at still, it's you take California. People are leaving California more than any other state. So instead of saying, gee, what are we doing wrong? Oh, let's punish them. We'll put on a tax if they want to leave. You know what I mean? You're the one that's causing this. There are no mirrors in government. None. It's always us, never them.
Yeah, I like that. There are no mirrors in government. That is a great quote. Well, I'm going to put a link in the description below to the Socrates platform, as well as Armstrong Economics, where you write free articles that people can take advantage of, and I recommend they do head there. So click the links in the description below. Thank you once again, Martin, for coming on and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
Thank you. You're always a pleasure, a good interviewer.
And thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, this episode is brought to you by ARC, silver, gold, osmium. For all your precious metals needs, head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441. Take advantage of their special right now. 2023 silver kangaroos, mint fresh at $2.07 over spot. Well, supplies last. And make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.